Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, September 6, 2024. Labor Department out with the August jobs report. 142,000 jobs created, fewer than in recent months. The unemployment rate falls from 4.3% to 4.2%. President Joe Biden travels to Ann Arbor, Michigan to sign an executive order to prioritize labor standards and employee benefits when federal agencies award grants for projects like infrastructure. Former President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, speaks to the Fraternal Order of Police meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina, and gets the union's endorsement. Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney reveals that not only she, but her father, former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney, will vote for the Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. We'll talk with C-SPAN's Westminster producer Peter Knowles in London about why campaign polling in Great Britain before this summer's general election there did not match how the voters actually voted and what lessons the U.S. can learn. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy attends for the first time a meeting of the coalition of more than 50 nations led by the U.S. helping Ukraine in the war with Russia, and again asks for long-range missiles to strike into Russian territory. And a Turkish American has been killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank. We'll hear from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The U.S. economy added fewer jobs than expected in August, while the unemployment rate ticked lower. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics released Friday showed the labor market added 142,000 non-farm payroll jobs in August, fewer additions than the 165,000 expected by economists. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate fell to 4.2% from 4.3% in July. That was from Yahoo Finance. President Biden spoke about the jobs report during his event today in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Earlier today, we learned the economy created another 142,000 jobs last month. That's 42 straight months in a row. Every single month increasing jobs to a total of 16 million new jobs since we took office. It's a fact. And they told us we couldn't do it. Over 1.6 million jobs in construction and manufacturing. Where the hell is it written that America can't lead the world again in manufacturing? We are leading the world in manufacturing, and we'll continue to. Unemployment is down, wages are up. Inflation is way down and continue to come down. I predict it's going to come down this month a little more.
President Joe Biden today in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee, talked about the August jobs report today in New York City.
Let me talk about job numbers because, as you know, they just came out, and they're a basic disaster. They are really bad. You had numbers that are shocking. Native-born Americans, we lost 1.3 million jobs, while foreign-born Americans were able to take all of those jobs. So foreigners coming in illegally, largely illegally, into our country, took the jobs of native-born Americans. And I've been telling you that's what's going to happen, because we have millions and millions of people pouring into our country, many from prisons and jails and mental institutions and insane asylums. Traffickers, human traffickers, women traffickers, sex traffickers, which, by the way, that's the kind of thing that people should be looking at because it's horrible. And it's turning out that migrant crime is far worse than any crime that we've ever experienced. If you look at Aurora, Colorado, they're taking over the place. They took over buildings, and this is just the beginning. You haven't seen anything yet. You haven't seen any. They've allowed well over 20 million people, in my opinion. Other people say, well, it's only 13. No, it's much more than 20. I think it's much more than 20.
Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee today in New York City. Associated Press writes the cooling jobs figures underscore why the Federal Reserve is set to cut its key interest rate when it next meets September 17th and 18th, with inflation falling steadily back to its target of 2%. Still, the August jobs data raises the question of how large a rate cut the Fed will announce. It could decide to reduce its benchmark rate by a typical quarter point or by a larger than usual half point. In the coming months, the policymakers will also decide how much and how fast to cut rates at their subsequent meetings. That was from Associated Press. And on Wall Street today, the Dow down 410, NASDAQ down 436, S&P down 94. Donald Trump was in New York City today. He was there for the second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals hearing, an appeal of a jury finding last year that Donald Trump sexually abused E. Jean Carroll and awarded her $5 million. One of the issues at today's hearing was whether some evidence at the trial should have been excluded, such as the Access Hollywood tape in which Donald Trump boasts about grabbing women's private parts. Another AP article reads, every time Donald Trump denies that he sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll, he runs the risk she will sue him again for defamation. Juries now have twice awarded Carroll huge sums for Trump claiming she made up a story about him attacking her in a department store dressing room in 1996 to help her sell a memoir. But that hasn't stopped Donald Trump from continuing to make nearly identical statements to reporters. At his news briefing Friday, he said again that Carroll was telling a made-up, fabricated story. That was from AP. We covered that briefing live. You can find the video at cspan.org. Also today, the judge in Donald Trump's criminal hush money case, in which a jury found him guilty of 34 felonies, has postponed the sentencing from September 18th to November 26th. Judge Juan M. Marichon reads another AP story, said in his decision Friday that he wanted to avoid any perception that the sentence was intended to tilt the scales in the presidential election. Back to President Joe Biden, Detroit News says that he will return on Friday to Michigan, where he'll sign an order directing federal agencies to prioritize new labor standards in their project selections, including voluntary union recognition and employee benefits. The White House detailed the Good Jobs Order in a press release Friday morning. Biden will sign it during an afternoon visit to United Association Local 190's Job Training Center. The new order will instruct federal agencies to consider prioritizing projects that supply child and dependent care, health insurance, paid leave, and retirement benefits, and to incentivize pro-labor standards to the greatest extent possible by including application evaluation criteria about them, according to the White House. That was from the Detroit News. Here is President Joe Biden.
For jobs created using federal dollars, Good Jobs, the executive order will call on a federal agency to protect the workers, the power of the workers, to encourage the free and fair choice to join a union. My executive order goes on to call on federal agencies to include high labor standards in grants that we give, prioritizing projects that pay wages you can raise a family on and provide benefits like child care. Right now, Davis-Bacon prevailing wage only applies to construction jobs, and construction jobs are booming. My executive order, though, promotes federal policies to raise wages beyond construction, all across the manufacturing sector, because manufacturing is booming. My executive order will also strengthen the pipeline to good jobs. It'll promote policies to create more registered apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, and other job training programs that don't require a college degree, that put young people on a pathway to getting the skills for good-paying union jobs. And finally, my Good Jobs executive order will level the playing field for underserved communities, ensure everyone gets a fair shot at a job. That means elevating the best practices to prevent discrimination and bias in hiring, protect the safety of workers. It all matters. Kamala and I are going to hold federal agencies accountable by creating a task force led by the Secretary of Labor, by the Director of National Labor, the National Economic Council, to make sure we fully implement this new job order, create jobs executive order, The ideas are just common sense. Economists have long believed that these good job standards produce more opportunities and better outcomes for workers and more predictable outcomes for business as well. It turned out to be a win-win situation for everyone, including business.
President Biden today at a labor organizing training center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Back to the Detroit News article. A statewide poll of 600 likely voters last week, commissioned by the Detroit News and WDIV-TV, showed Donald Trump, the former president, with a slight lead over Vice President Harris in Michigan, 44.7% to 43.5%. The survey had a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points. Asked what the most important issue for the upcoming election was, 19.5% of the poll's participants said jobs and the economy, making it the top answer. That was from the Detroit News. From the LA Times, House Republicans are in California on Friday for a field hearing, bringing their 2024 election campaign message about Democrats' handling of the border to Vice President Kamala Harris's home turf. The House Judiciary Committee's hearing, The Biden-Harris Border Crisis, California Perspectives, takes place in Santee, California, a city in eastern San Diego County. The California stop is one of several hearings planned by House Republicans in the run-up to November. That was from the LA Times. Today's hearing was chaired by Congressman Darrell Issa, Republican of California.
This hearing has the purpose to highlight the unique challenges we face in San Diego and, as I said, Riverside communities as a result of the unprecedented border crisis which began in 2021 and today has displaced what would otherwise be openings in housing and jobs of more than 14 million Americans. Illegal immigration is something that is used lightly. We're not using it lightly. The fact is that there are, among the millions who have come here illegally, there are people legitimately seeking asylum. There are people who legitimately, more than 1 million a year, who have gone through the process to come to America legally. It is our goal to restore the rule of law and to, in fact, recognize that we can have immigration in our country, we can have prosperity for all, but we can only do so if we can control our borders. Today we will also become acutely aware further of the impact of crime, whether it's the growth of illicit drugs, including fentanyl, or the border crime now that goes back and forth, including the trade in human trafficking. This hearing will tell the truth directly from people who will testify as to their experience of what the difference between the last administration and the policies of the last 3.5 years and how they have influenced them. On day one of the administration halted border security. As a matter of fact, I was a witness 4 years ago to the administration stopping the construction of the last phases of the new border here. And as a result, the border fence was not completed, and even today is not completed, but was not continued as the materials rusted and the world became aware you could just walk into America. We will try to keep decorum here. We will try to make this not partisan. But there's no question at all, there's a right direction and a wrong direction, and it's clear we'll hear from the testimony today that we've been going in the wrong directions.
Congressman Darrell Issa, a Republican from California, chairing today's House Judiciary Committee field hearing on border security and immigration held in Santee, California. The witnesses included the mayors of Santee and Vista and the district attorney and undersheriff of Riverside County. Another AP article, Justice Department officials are turning to the 3D printing industry to help stop the proliferation of tiny pieces of plastic transforming weapons into illegal homemade machine guns on streets across America. The rising threat of what are known as machine gun conversion devices requires, quote, immediate and sustained attention, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco said Friday. That means finding ways to stop criminals from exploiting technology to make the devices in the first place, she said. That was from AP. Also speaking at today's meeting on machine gun conversion devices at the ATF headquarters in Washington, its director, Stephen Dettelbach.
Now, when we first started seeing this, machine gun conversion devices appeared to be a localized problem. They affected just a few different states, and they were sort of an item that gangs and drug traffickers tried to get. In just a short time, however, with technological advancements in additive manufacturing, specifically 3D printing, law enforcement began to see MCD spreading like wildfire. More and more of these devices were being sold over the internet and on social media, and more they're actually just being printed by inexpensive 3D printers in homes and garages everywhere. And not only was I hearing about this from chiefs and sheriffs and mayors and communities leaders, but we were seeing hard data that backed up what I heard. I remember one chief telling me I remember his words, "It's raining Glock switches." In 2023, ATF released Volume 2 of the National Firearms Commerce and Trafficking Assessment, which reports on crime guns. The report revealed that in the decade before 2021, there was a 570% increase in the number of conversion devices recovered by law enforcement. 570%. By the way, this number almost certainly underestimates the true scope of the problem, because these are the things that are recovered and reported. And law enforcement, in many instances, doesn't even know what to look for always when it searches for machine gun conversion devices, because they don't look like Tommy guns, right? They look like this. That's why, of course, we harnessed our expertise as the nation's expert in MCDs here at ATF to work with and train alongside our prosecution colleagues, all our law enforcement colleagues and partners, how to spot these devices, how to identify them, how to charge the individuals with machine gun conversion device violations. And we've done trainings for literally thousands and thousands of our law enforcement partners. Because, did I forget to mention it? I'll say it again. Illegal possession of a machine gun is a federal crime, period. So given the 570% increase in recoveries, it's not a surprise that machine gun conversion devices are now the most common type of illegal firearm recovered in ATF trafficking cases. They account for almost 55% of the firearms recovered in our trafficking investigations between 2017 and 2021.
ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach at a Justice Department meeting today in Washington about machine gun conversion devices. Another AP article, the 14-year-old suspect in a shooting that killed 4 people at a Georgia high school and his father, who was arrested for allowing his son to have a weapon, will stay in custody after their lawyers decided not to seek bail Friday. Colt Gray, who has been charged with 4 counts of murder, is accused of using a semi-automatic assault-style rifle to kill 2 fellow students and 2 teachers Wednesday at Appalachia High School in Winder, outside Atlanta. His father, Colin Gray, faces related charges in the latest attempt by prosecutors to hold parents responsible for their children's actions in school shootings, reporting from AP. Former President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, spoke today to the Fraternal Order of Police National Board of Trustees fall meeting in Charlotte. The FOP union has endorsed Donald Trump in 2024. Here's its president, Patrick Yos.
For over a century, the Fraternal Order of Police has been at very forefront of every meaningful advancement in the law enforcement profession. We've done so because we've achieved this by working together and having meaningful dialogue aimed at a common goal, and that is making our communities and our both safer and stronger, and advocating for the men and women who are brave enough to put on a badge. With over 377,000 members nationwide, our presidential endorsement process is thorough and inclusive, allowing members in each state to make this selection. Specific questions were posed to both candidates regarding policing in America, and candidate interviews were requested. Our members have spoken, and it is my honor to share with you the overwhelming collective will of our membership. We are honored to have with us today the former and future President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and offer him our enthusiastic endorsement. During his time in the White House, we had a partner and a leader. Today, Mr. President, we stand with you. We stand with you and we have your back, and we're committed to work tirelessly for your election. We stood with you when you championed the First Step Act, a bold and historic effort to reform the criminal justice system. We stood with you when you established a Presidential Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice, demonstrating your true, genuine commitment to advancing policing in this country, and you did it at a time when it wasn't a political battleground it is now. We stood with you 4 years ago when the public tried to defund law enforcement across this country, and we stand with you today, and we will help make the case across America to every American of why we need you back in the White House in a leadership role.
Patrick Yos is president of the Fraternal Order of Police, introducing and endorsing former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, today at a meeting of the FOP in Charlotte, North Carolina.
In city after city, the law-abiding citizen is forced to live in fear and danger and in filth. Mothers can't take their kids to the park. Graffiti is everywhere. The innocent are victimized in random attacks. Very brutal attacks and slayings are absolutely commonplace. Mobs of criminals walk into stores and clean out thousands of dollars in merchandise with absolutely no fear of punishment because you're not allowed to do your jobs. You can't even go to a pharmacy without everything being locked behind glass. The new thing in New York, you go to a pharmacy to buy aspirin, to buy a toothbrush, and it takes you 45 minutes to get a clerk to open up the glass because people are walking in just taking as much as they want. I don't know if you know that in San Francisco, which this woman, our opponent, I would say our opponent, I think we can, anybody in favor of her in this room, by the way? Let me just... Okay, then I can safely say our opponent. But she destroyed San Francisco, but she came up with a great idea. You can steal as much as you want, up to $950, and nothing happens to you. After that, nothing happens to you also, if you want to really, when you think of it, really nothing happens to you no matter what the hell you do. Unless you happen to be running for office and you accuse the election of being fraudulent, then a lot of things happen, okay? But other than that, nothing happens. Think of that, 950. So guys are walking in with calculators. You have criminals walking in, they're adding it up because they know if they stay below 950, can you believe it? 950 is like a lot of money, isn't it? Under the Harris regime, 99% of law-abiding citizens suffer while criminals run free, and our country is plagued into literally third world conditions. In many ways, we're a third world country, but we're going to clean that up real fast. I'm here today to declare that we do not have to live this way, and when I'm president of the United States, we are not going to take it anymore. We're not going to take it anymore. Thank you.
Donald Trump at the Fraternal Order of Police union meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Harris-Walz Democratic presidential campaign held a teleconference ahead of Donald Trump's speech, and it included the sheriff of Durham County, North Carolina, Clarence Burkhead.
Donald Trump is coming back to North Carolina this week, where he will try to portray himself as a friend of law enforcement. But we know it's not true. He's proven time and time again he can't be trusted to deliver on his promises to law enforcement officers like me and my colleagues. As president, Trump turned his back on us and proposed a $4 million cut to law enforcement funding. In a second term, his Project 2025 agenda would go even further to withhold more funds, making it nearly impossible for us to keep our communities safe from violence. During Trump's term, the nation saw the largest single-year spike in the murder rate in more than a century. Not only does Trump want to slash law enforcement funding, but he also wants to strip agencies like mine of crucial federal assets by weaponizing the FBI and Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies. Under Trump, the feds would waste precious time and money on his personal grievances instead of pouring valuable resources into communities like mine that rely on assistance from our federal partners. Trump also killed the most aggressive bipartisan border deal in decades that would have helped us address drug trafficking by gangs, all for his personal political reasons. Trump has repeatedly demonstrated to the American people that he cares about one thing, himself. One thing I know for certain, there is another candidate on the ballot who has spent her entire career fighting for people and standing with local law enforcement like me, Vice President Harris. As a former prosecutor, Vice President Harris knows firsthand what it takes to keep our communities safe from violence and hold criminals accountable. It's no surprise that the Biden-Harris administration increased public safety funding by billions of dollars that contributed to a 50-year low in violent crime last year, including here in Durham County.
Clarence Burkhead is the sheriff of Durham County, North Carolina, on a teleconference hosted by the Harris-Walz campaign ahead of Donald Trump's visit to that county to speak to the Fraternal Order of Police and get their endorsement. Washington Today continues in a moment with more on the U.S. presidential campaign. Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who has said she'll be voting for Kamala Harris, speaks about how her father, former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney, will vote.
Watch the ABC News presidential debate simulcast live on the C-SPAN networks, Tuesday, September 10th, as the candidates go head-to-head for their first debate since securing their party's nominations. Coverage begins with a preview show at 8 p.m., followed by the debate at 9 p.m. Eastern. The ABC News presidential debate simulcast, live Tuesday, September 10th, on the C-SPAN networks. C-SPAN, your unfiltered view of politics. Powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Story at the Texas Tribune, former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney will vote for Kamala Harris. His daughter, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, said at the Texas Tribune Festival. Liz Cheney also endorsed Democrat Colin Allred in his race to beat Republican U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Liz Cheney previously endorsed Harris. That was from the Texas Tribune. Here is Liz Cheney, interviewed at the festival in Austin, Texas, by Mark Leibovich, the Atlantic staff writer.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. Do you, if you know who he will be supporting or who he'll be voting for, do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Okay. Wow. Words I never expected to hear.
Yeah. You know, if you think about the moment that we're in, and you think about how serious this moment is. You know, my dad believes, and he's said publicly, that there's never been an individual in our country who is as grave a threat to our democracy as Donald Trump is. And that's the moment that we're facing. And so I think recognizing that, and let me also say, you know, obviously Vice President Harris and I have had and have policy disagreements on some issues, but I have been really impressed watching, for example, the Democratic Convention, listening to her speech at that convention, learning about her life story, learning about, you know, the story of her success and the extent to which it's an American story. And I think we all have to walk ourselves back from this abyss that we've looked over in our politics and work together to build a better future for this country.
Liz Cheney, former Republican Congresswoman from Wyoming, interviewed by Mark Leibovich, the Atlantic staff writer at the Texas Tribune Festival in Austin, Texas. A Newsweek article reads that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are in a dead heat in the swing states, according to a new poll. The poll conducted by Patriot Polling shows that Trump is to flip Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada and keep North Carolina red, while Harris is to narrowly keep Michigan and Wisconsin blue. However, all of the results fall within the poll's margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points, indicating that the races in the swing states are extremely tight. That was from Newsweek. How reliable are election polls? Great Britain over the summer started and finished its comparatively short general election campaign, and analysts have been able to compare the pre-election polls with the results. C-SPAN's Westminster producer Peter Knowles joins us now from London with what was found and some lessons that could be learned for the U.S. election. Thanks as always for being with us. How accurate were the polls in Great Britain?
There are two views on that. There are some pollsters who say we did okay. We predicted a Labour landslide, and that's what we got. And we predicted the rise of 2 or 3 smaller parties, and that's what you saw. Nothing to see here, move on, it wasn't perfect, but that's okay. But there are a lot of pollsters who I've been talking to who are really, really unhappy with their performance on this general election, because the other story to tell is that, sure, they got it right that Labour were going to win, but they exaggerated, they overestimated the Labour vote consistently throughout the entire campaign and right up to the day before, and predicted a whopping great Labour lead in votes. And that only partly happened. It was a lot less of a lead. It was 5% of points less than had been predicted. Now, in a tight election, that would have made the difference between getting the result wrong or right. As it was, Labour was so much in the lead that the problem was disguised. But my goodness, there was a problem there. A very significant overestimate of Labour's vote and of their lead over the Conservatives.
Do they know why there were inaccuracies? Do they know why they missed that target?
There are 1 or 2 pretty useful theories. Overall, there's some perplexity because the pollsters have worked very hard to get their panels right. They've tried to weight for various biases in voting preferences and enthusiasm for different parties, and it still didn't come right. So a lot of the pollsters think they need a very serious inquiry into why it all went wrong. But what they're observing, what they're noticing, is that this is a consistent pattern over many general elections, not quite all of them, but over very many, and in many, many places in the world where the inclination to vote, to say that you're going to vote left, but what you do in reality are 2 different things. And there does seem to be a trend here over time and over place to exaggerate the left-leaning vote. And how that comes about through makeup of panels and why people are doing something different from what they said they would do, that really needs a lot more inquiry. There is one specific that seems to be generally accepted, which is that the polling completely missed the disaffection with Labour from from Muslim voters, probably especially young male Muslim voters. And the strong suspicion is that they were largely absent from the opinion poll panels. And the direct result of that particular miss is that what nobody saw coming is that Labour actually lost a few seats to independent, pro-Palestinian candidates. More seats than were expected were lost to the Greens, and even one seat, consequentially on this, was lost incredibly to the Conservatives, despite the overall landslide, because we did see a landslide in terms of the number of seats changing hands. So that missing out on what was happening amongst the Muslim vote is a clear lesson to be learned from this one. But the rest, I think, an awful lot more serious thinking is going to be needed.
How are polls in Great Britain viewed by the public? I ask that because there is the term in the United States by some of a fake poll used to discredit certain polls. So when polls are presented to the voters there, how do they accept them? Do they take them at face value?
They are largely taken at face value because nearly all of the pollsters are signed up to a professional body, the British Polling Council, which supervises and offers guidance and guidelines as to how polls should be conducted. And people's experience of polling is actually coloured by the fact that on the night of general elections, we get an exit poll, which in recent elections has been spectacularly accurate. Even though this is quite complex prediction work because of the multi-party system that we have here, those results have been really good. And so people think of particularly of those. But no, there isn't a general mistrust. But perhaps there needs to be a greater degree of skepticism because actually the polls do get it wrong. And I know, some of the broadcasters, and particularly the BBC, are very assiduous about not overemphasizing the importance of opinion polls. So the BBC will not lead its bulletins, its news programs, on an individual poll that's come out, and the journalists are strongly encouraged to play down the importance of polling. And this matters because, of course, if you have a situation, as happened in our general election, where one party is shown to be spectacularly in front, up to 20 percentage points in front of the second party, then people think their vote, in a sense, is a free vote. It doesn't matter what they do because they kind of think they know the outcome of the election. So they might, that's going to affect how they vote and whether they vote for other parties because they think they've got they can act freely. So it is important, and the BBC particularly emphasises that opinion polls are only polls that of opinion. They don't reflect any actual votes cast and shouldn't be given too much credence. But there isn't a deep-rooted suspicion that there are bad actors or that there is anything sort of fraudulent going on in the voting system.
As you were looking at the analysis of the polls in Great Britain, was there any mention of what's happening in the U.S. and the lessons that can be learned?
Well, the U.S. is regarded as a tremendously simple proposition, which is that it is, as the U.K. used to be for a period of decades, a relatively straightforward two-party system. I know there are other parties, but their impact on the presidential election is pretty small, I would say. The extent to which comparisons can be made is limited because the pollsters here have to factor in national variations. The Scottish National Party in Scotland, completely different set of political parties. Labour and the Conservatives don't even put up candidates in Northern Ireland. And all these complexities around the importance of the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, Reform, a brand new party. So they are very different setups. But I think that the one thing that is probably worth reflecting on in both contexts is that it's this question of the herd instinct. I mean, what was really remarkable in the general election we've just seen in the UK is all the pollsters were saying the same thing. They were all getting it wrong in the same way, exaggerating the vote that was eventually went to Labour. So I think the encouragement that offers to voters in every place, in the United States as much as in the UK, is just to be wary of polls and to be wary of when they seem to be telling you something absolutely definitive. Well, maybe they're not. Maybe they're all wrong. And I think that's one of the lessons that we've learned, and that's a lesson that perhaps has its implications in the States.
Peter Knowles, C-SPAN's Westminster producer, joining us from London. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Article from Voice of America. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told military allies meeting Friday in Germany that his country needs the long-range capability to strike deep inside Russian territory, quote, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace. It marked the first time that the Ukrainian president had traveled to Ramstein Air Base in Germany to meet with the Ukrainian Defense Contact Group, a U.S.-led coalition of more than 50 nations that coordinates military support for Ukraine. Zelenskyy noted there has been no change in the U.S. policy, which does not allow Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied weapons to fire on targets deep within Russian territory. The White House has expressed concerns that could draw the United States into direct conflict with Russia. That was the article from Voice of America. Here is President Zelenskyy on those long-range missiles and also the need for air defense systems.
I'm grateful to all partners for the fact that the NATO summit in Washington was marked by decisive on air defense systems for Ukraine, and I will not speak openly now about the number of systems we have received. Thank you so much again. But the number of air defense systems that have not yet been delivered is significant. This is what was agreed upon, and this is what has not been fully implemented. The world has enough air defense systems to ensure that Russian terror does not have results. And I urge you to be more active in this work with us on air defense, and we have already started operating F-16s. Thank you for this support, Secretary, and to you partners. And they strike down missiles and drones. They are very efficient, but they are few, you know about it, and we need much stronger fleet of F-16s. And I have proposals that I will say when the press leaves. Third point, long-range capability. I'm glad that the United States, United Kingdom, France, Italy are represented here. Thank you so much. And I want to say this openly so that there is no speculation. Thanks to our joint courage, we have implemented very, very important operations, in particular in Crimea. These operations allowed us to return security to the Black Sea and our food export. Now we hear that your long-range policy has not changed, but we see changes in the attack on Storm Shadow and Scalps, a shortage of missiles and cooperation. And this applies even to our territory, which is occupied by Russia, including Crimea. We think it is wrong that there are such steps. We need to have this long-range capability not only on the occupied territory of Ukraine, but also on the Russian territory. Yes, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at Ramstein Air Base in Germany during a meeting of the 50-plus countries that have been aiding Ukraine in the war with Russia. After the meeting, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin held a news conference with General Charles C.Q. Brown, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Secretary Austin said that since February 2022, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group members have provided Ukraine with more than $106 billion in security and defense assistance. A reporter asked Secretary Austin about President Zelenskyy's war strategy.
Did President Zelenskyy offer more detail on his plan for victory that he says he'll be presenting in the United States later this month? And, as a former U.S. general, do you believe that either side could, definitively declare victory on the battlefield in the next few months while the Biden administration still has time in office? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Phil. I did get a chance to spend some quality time with President Zelenskyy, and you'll recall that President Zelenskyy outlined his goals and objectives during his opening comments, and I would point you to that if you have questions about specific objectives. But in terms of the plan for victory, Phil, we didn't discuss that. We talked about a number of things, but that specific piece we didn't discuss, and President Zelenskyy is going to present that to President Biden and other leaders, at the first opportunity. In terms of whether or not victory is achievable, again, I think this war could end very quickly if Mr. Putin decided to pull his forces out of the places that he's occupied in Ukraine. I mean, this was started by Putin. It could end Putin could end it very quickly if he just made the simple and right decision to undo what he's done. In terms of absolute victory, it really depends on how you define that. Ukraine is focused on defending its sovereign territory. We're going to continue to do everything we can to help them do that. What Russia's goals and objectives are, couldn't speak to that specifically, and victory would be defined by goals and objectives. But we know from the very beginning that he's wanted to annex Ukraine because he doesn't believe that Ukraine is a bona fide country. I think that eventually this conflict will be decided at a resolved at a negotiation table. But when that point comes, it's hard to predict, Phil. So we're going to continue to work to put Ukraine in the best possible position that it can be in when and if that day comes in the future. So.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at a news conference in Germany after a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group member nations. Israeli troops, writes Reuters, shot and killed a Turkish-American woman who had been taking part in a protest against settlement expansion in the Israeli-occupied West Bank on Friday, Palestinian and Turkish officials said. The White House said it was deeply disturbed by the death and called on Israel to investigate. Turkey's foreign ministry said she was shot in the head and placed blame on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government for her death. That article from Reuters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was asked about this at a news conference while he was visiting the Dominican Republic.
Thanks so much. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Mr. Secretary, we've seen these reports this morning about the killing of an American in the West Bank. Could you tell us a little bit about what you know about the killing of that American, Ayşenur Ece? What's your message for Americans who are concerned that you are providing military aid to a country that is killing U.S. citizens? And is there ever a point at which the killing of Americans in that region could lead to a change in U.S. policy of weapons provision?
Michael, thank you. First, I just want to extend my deepest condolences, the deepest condolences of the United States government, to the family of Ayşenur Ece. We deplore this tragic loss. Now, the most important thing to do is to gather the facts, and that's exactly what we're in the process of doing. And we are intensely focused on getting those facts. And any actions that we take are driven by the facts. So first things first, let's find out exactly what happened, and we will draw the necessary conclusions and consequences from that. As you've heard me say many times before, I have no higher priority than the safety and protection of American citizens around the world, wherever they are. Something I take with the utmost seriousness. So, as we have more info, we'll share it, we'll make it available, and as necessary, we'll act on it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken during a news conference in the Dominican Republic. Times of Israel writing about it. Israel's military said its troops had fired toward a male main instigator who posed a threat by hurling rocks at soldiers. The military was looking into reports that a female foreign national was killed as a result of shots fired in the area. The details of the incident and the circumstances in which she was hit are under review. That article also has a statement from the Turkish foreign minister. We condemn this murder committed by the Netanyahu government. Israel is trying to intimidate all those who come to the aid of the Palestinian people and who fight peacefully against the genocide. This policy of violence will not work. Secretary Blinken was in the Dominican Republic today. Yesterday, he was in Haiti, the other nation on that island, where he met with the interim prime minister and at a news conference said the U.S. will push for more funding for an international police force that is on the ground taking on armed gangs.
As this political process has moved forward, in parallel, so too is the necessary efforts to provide a strong security foundation. And in particular, the Multinational Security Support Mission, authorized by the United Nations last year, has moved forward. Over the past several months, more than 380 Kenyan personnel have arrived in support of the Haitian National Police as part of this mission, with more to come. In recent weeks, the MSS with the Haitian National Police has increased joint operations, taking the fight to the gangs and delivering a powerful message. The Haitian people not Haitian gangs, will write the country's future. As a result, the airports reopened, commercial flights have resumed, allowing goods to enter the country. In parts of Port-au-Prince, there's more economic activity, more markets reopened, more people venturing out. In my meetings today with leaders of the security mission, with the Haitian police, we discussed how to ensure that security personnel are well-trained, well-equipped, and accountable so that they can work together to effectively combat violence and instability and maintain Haiti's momentum. The United States, for our part, has already delivered over $300 million to support this multinational mission, sending armored vehicles, radios, night vision goggles, standing up an entire base of operations, and we'll be getting more assistance here more quickly. We've also provided $200 million to the Haitian police since 2021, helping to train and equip new recruits, as well as specialized anti-gang units. We deeply appreciate the indispensable leadership of Kenya, President Ruto, as well as the contributions of CARICOM and the international community.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Port-au-Prince, Haiti on Thursday. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word, and you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.